Good morning and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us again today. We're very excited to see some familiar faces again. Today is our second session from our CSI Support Institute, and today we're going to be focusing on the components of effective coaching cycles and feedback or action steps. If you haven't had a chance yet, please do make sure you take a minute to sign in. There's a sign-in link in the chat. And then all materials for today will be in the Google Classroom. I posted them this morning and I immediately saw people like already in the documents. You guys are on top of it. Just in case you are someone who's still having issues with the Google Classroom, here is, I'm putting in the chat a direct link to the handout, which has links to everything else you will need. But you can find all of the materials in Google Classroom, and that's where we'll also post the recording and the slides after today's session. All right, if you weren't here last time, or if you just forgot who we are, my name is Namisha Thakur. I'm a director of academics here at TNTP. We've been working with Nebraska Department of Ed for the last couple of years, and part of that work has been supporting CSI schools. So we're just really, we love this part of our work. It's always such a joy to spend time with educators who are so passionate about what they do. And I'll pass it off to my colleague Nadia for a quick minute.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Nadia Nibs, Senior Manager with TNTP, and I'm located here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I've also been working with Namisha for about 2 years on this contract, and it's been an absolute pleasure. And I'm excited and super amped for today's session 2 in the series.
And Abby is another senior manager on our work who normally manages all of our Zoom logistics, but she cannot be here today. So I'm letting you know that just so you can bear with us just in case, as Nadia and I are trying to manage all the breakouts and polls and all the Zoom things while we're facilitating, it might be a tad bit slower than normal. So bear with us. All right, so let's take a couple minutes here to just pause and get all our housekeeping things together before we jump into content. So I'm going to pause here on this slide for a minute or two, just so you have the space to make sure you're signed in, to make sure that you have all the materials you need open, and that you have a chance to update your Zoom username if needed. These are all the same guidance as our last session. Please include in your Zoom username either your school, district, or ESU. And if you are physically in a room with a group of people, indicate that in your Zoom username as well. Last time we kind of ran into a little bit of snag with breakout rooms. When there are some people joining the call within in-person groups and some people joining individually on their own Zoom lines. Totally fine if you're in a group with other people, just if you could make that clear to us in your name, then when we set up breakout rooms, we'll ask you to just not join a breakout room since you can just be talking in person with your colleagues. All right, I'm just going to pause here for a second, give everybody a minute to get caught up. If you need a link to anything, just pop it in the chat. One last ask of you all. We're going to ask we totally understand that, things come up, you might have to step away, or you might have like kids in your office or whatever. And if you need to turn your video off from time to time, that's a-okay. We're just asking, especially when we're in breakout rooms, just so it can feel like, especially if the groups are smaller, like 2 to 3 people in a breakout room, if you could keep your video on at least for those moments, so your colleagues can kind of see who they are getting the chance to talk to, that would be excellent. So thank you for that. All right, we have the same norms for all of our sessions. Stay engaged, experience discomfort, speak your truth, and expect and accept non-closure. So just take maybe 20 to 30 seconds on your own to remind yourself of these norms and drop one in the chat that you feel like you want to center for yourself today. All right, I'm seeing lots of stay engaged. Nadia and I are going to do our best to keep you engaged and keep it real and bring you into the conversation as much as possible. Thank you all for sharing in the chat. So in our first session, which was just a few weeks ago, but feels like a lifetime ago. I don't know about you guys. In our first session a few weeks ago, we grounded learning for this year in instructional coaching. So we're going to dig a little bit deeper today into a component of that, effective coaching cycles and action steps. So our hope is that you leave today with some actionable strategies that you can add to your coaching practice between now and our next virtual session, which is not until January. Of course, we are going to have one more touch point between now and January in the form of our regional site visits, which will provide a great opportunity to apply and practice your learning on the ground and in real time. But over the next 3 hours today, we are going to define the core components of an effective coaching cycle. We'll practice using the core rubric to take low inference notes and identify strengths and growth areas. We'll synthesize observation data to identify the highest impact lever for coaching and support. And we'll practice writing specific action steps for teacher development. Here's kind of where we are situated in the sort of scope and sequence of our journey together. At the end of today's session, we're going to share some updates about the upcoming site visits. We do have some host schools, which we're super excited about. Those site visits are just around the corner, so we'll share a little bit more about that at the end of today's session and in a follow-up email. All right, I've done a lot of talking, so I'm going to pass it off to you guys for a second for a quick breakout icebreaker. In your breakout rooms in just a moment, would love for you to share with your colleagues if you had to liken your default leadership style to one of these 3 kitchen appliances, which would you choose and why? I'm providing no other context. Which of these 3 appliances would you be as a leader and why? Yes. All right, Nadia, can we open breakout rooms whenever you're ready?
Testing.
All right, let's hear from some people. You can either share your own or you can share something really creative that you heard from someone else in your group. Which of these appliances are you and why?
Yeah, I can go ahead. I chose, I'm Dave from Winnebago. I chose a crock pot mainly because I don't own the other two, and I had a Instapot for a short while, didn't like it. So we'll go with the crock pot. And my take on it was you put in a lot of these delicious ingredients, and if you put in the right ingredients over time, you're going to end up with this delicious meal. And that's kind of like education. You try to put all the pieces together, and over time, it's not a quick fix in most cases. You're going to brew up a delicious educational outcomes, I guess we'll say. And that's my take.
I love it. Thank you for sharing. So you get all the right pieces in place and you let it simmer, right?
That's correct.
Let's hear from one or two other people, especially if you picked if you picked either the Instant Pot or the whatever that's called, the pasta thingy.
I'm Melanie Reeves and I'm in Ralston. I actually picked the pasta maker because I felt like you could make pasta out of a variety of ingredients and you can put on whatever dye that you need. So if one teacher needs support with angel hair, a team might need lasagna, another one might need fettuccine, really being able to be flexible to support teachers and staff however you need to.
Love that. Was anyone the Instant Pot? I don't own an Instant Pot, so I don't really know what it
Yeah,
does.
this is
Oh,
Maggie from Grand Island. I chose the Instapot because I have one that is both a slow cooker and an Instapot. So while I agree with the slow cooker and getting the systems in place, there are times where you got to be the Instapot and it just needs to get done, and needs to get done now for kids.
thank you all for sharing. We got some really creative brains in this group. Thank you for engaging in that. With that, we will jump into our content for today, and we're going to start out with diving into what makes an effective coaching cycle.
All right. So thank you so much for setting that up, Namisha, and for those really creative and amazing responses. I'm definitely a pasta maker for very similar reasons. So yeah, let's go ahead and chat about coaching. So first and foremost, time is so precious, as we all know. Each touch point we have with a teacher has the power to meaningfully develop them in service of strong outcomes for kids. And when our coaching conversations are goal-driven and rigorous, we can grow that quality teaching exponentially. So it's really important for us to think about coaching within the context of a larger cycle that's kind of part of a continuum for teacher development. I'm going to call on a couple of folks to come off mute and read each of the bullets. Can I have Chris from MTSS to come off and read our first bullet, please?
Sure. Using a consistent observation tool and utilizing language from that tool reinforces the vision for strong instruction in daily practice.
Excellent. As we know, sometimes a vision for strong instruction can feel so big but actually daily touch points or consistent coaching touch points actually reinforces that vision with every single conversation. Let's go ahead and have Melanie Reeves. Can you come off mute and read our second bullet, please?
Teachers receive multiple data points through observations and debriefs. It becomes easier to see the connection between certain instructional decisions and student outcomes.
Absolutely. That first coaching conversation always feels a little bit clunky because you're just getting off the ground. But once that cycle is in full swing, you start to see the growth, you start to see that trajectory change and shift, and the teacher starts to see it too, right? So making sure it's part of that collective cycle is really impactful to see that growth over the course of time. And let's go ahead and can we have Kelly Clapp come off mute and read our last bullet?
School leaders and staff developers can use the data from observation cycles to create development themes across grade levels, subject areas, or even across an entire staff.
Can't tell you how many times we've heard people say, what should we do with PD this week? Right? Coaching cycles, and we're collecting those data points. That is what dictates what your PD is, right? You're now collecting so many data points that's useful not only for teachers, but for you all as leaders. So now let's talk about what actually goes into a cycle. So a cycle can really be broken down into 4 parts, right? This first part is really a diagnostic. It's that first extended observation that kicks off a cycle to determine big bucket areas of success as well as areas of growth. And they're always aligned to that domain, as part of the rubric. Next, we're looking at a goal setting conversation. Now, this is that conversation where the coach and the teacher really get to sit together and think about, well, what is our overarching target that we're moving towards in this coaching cycle that's going to improve outcomes for kids? Third, that's where like the work is really happening, where the rubber really meets the road. It's that consistent dance of observations and debrief conversations. So anywhere from 2 to 4 targeted observations with follow-up conversations, right? And they're called targeted because they're in service of the goal. I might not be going in and observing for every single domain, every single indicator, every single time during this phase. I have our goal. Maybe our goal is falling under student ownership. It's specifically around one indicator. So now our targeted observations are aligned to see growth in that indicator. And finally, we are wrapping up our cycle with this final diagnostic. Again, another extended observation that bookends the cycle to help us celebrate the growth that happened from the beginning until now and think about, sweet, like what's to come next. So let's dig in just a little bit, right? Because as we know, we each have very different contexts. Some of us are coming from very large schools with teams of coaches that can be utilized in service of coaching conversations. Some of us are coming from pretty small schools and you're a team of 1 or 2. So how can we think really flexibly about a coaching cycle to maximize it for your particular context? Okay, so let's go back and look at the initial diagnostic. So extended can mean different things because your school days are structured uniquely. So essentially, we're thinking about, are you able to see enough parts of a lesson to be able to understand the flow, right? Did I observe the opening? Did I observe some direct instruction or student work time, right? I'm thinking about the flow of the lesson, not necessarily that bell to bell experience. So again, initial diagnostic can be pretty flexible. With our goal setting segment here, it's important that our goal setting is grounded in the language of the rubric, right? Because the tool isn't meant to be evaluative. What we're not saying is that you kick off this goal setting conversation, well, you know, your pace and culture of learning is a not yet. That's not what we're necessarily saying, right? If you have a culture in your school where you guys are driven by numbers and numbers don't scare people off and ratings don't scare people off, by all means, right? Be reflective and responsive to your culture and your dynamic. However, a lot of folks don't necessarily have that kind of energy in their school system and in their school site. So with that, think about how do we set goals that are objectively grounded in the student level data. All right, we're focusing on this indicator. What do we want to see, right? What do we want to see in terms of pace? Do we want to see more urgency with students? Awesome. Now let's think strategically about the things that can be put in place to facilitate the urgency that we want to see. You might know that that last observation was a not yet, right? And that's why you're help shaping the conversation to set that goal for student level outcome. But that's not necessarily an essential part of this goal setting conversation to share ratings necessarily. Because again, the tool isn't meant to be evaluative and coaching isn't meant to be evaluative. It's meant to be developmental. Third, digging into that cycle of observation debriefs. This is where people get the most skittish, right? Because they're like, man, 2 to 4 targeted observations. I barely have enough time for one. We get it. So again, here, the most important thing is carving out that time for it to be targeted. That might not mean 30-minute observations every single time. It could mean, great, we know that because student ownership and students doing more of the cognitive lift during independent reading time is what we're working towards. I know I'm going to be observing the part of the lesson where that is most likely. Maybe it's during that work time. Maybe I want to see the setup into the work time. So now I get to be really strategic with my day, and I get to be really strategic with my calendar. Again, it's not just about, quantity, but really about quality and making sure that your targeted observations are strategic and in service of the ultimate goal that you set with each other. And finally, right, as we know, that final diagnostic, again, that same goal is just to see diversity of approaches during a lesson. And it's really here to capture that growth. But really, too, we can also think about how to manipulate that final diagnostic to be useful for us in terms of time. Maybe we get to say, okay, here are all the things that we celebrated. Awesome. We've checked these things off. We made all this progress towards this goal. And from this final diagnostic, we've noticed some other things that we could start to move towards. And now you just kick off that cycle all over again. So you can really leverage that final diagnostic in service of you. If you have enough time and space to really have it be a bookend and reset a cycle in some neat way, awesome. But if that final diagnostic kind of flows into being an initial diagnostic again, awesome. Let's celebrate the growth that we've made. Boom. And now we just observe for 55 minutes. So let's set a new goal right here and now. And now we can keep that cycle rolling. So really use that final diagnostic to work for you. And that should be our underlying message for this. Use the process to work for you as long as it has these different components to it for a meaningful coaching cycle that can really push growth for teachers. Okay, so now that I've just chatted at you for a while, giving you some language, touch points, maybe reinforced, validated, darken the lines around things that you already do as part of your practice, or provided a shift in the way you can think about instructional coaching, we're going to send you to breakout rooms for a brief conversation with these 2 prompts. The prompts are also located in your handout, but I'll copy and paste them and drop them in the chat too, just in case that's more useful for you or in case you're having a hard time accessing the handout for whatever reason. But we'll go ahead and send you into breakout rooms to chat. How is this approach to coaching familiar or different than how you structured or experienced it in the past? And what are the potential strengths to structuring it in this way?
Morning.
Good
Are we-
morning.
Are we supposed to be discussing this stuff?
Yes, let's. Did you get a prompt that says join breakout room? Okay, welcome back. Welcome back. Let's go ahead and have 2 folks come off mute and share any high-level reflections that you feel are pertinent for the whole group. And if you were in a room with other groups and you had a robust conversation, we encourage you to come off mute and share as well. But we'd love to hear from you. Either one of these questions.
I would appreciate a countdown next time, so I know how to wrap up our conversation because ours, I don't know about anyone else or if I just missed the countdown, but ours just cut off mid-sentence.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, usually when we say closing, there's like usually a 60-second countdown that Zoom prompts, but we'll make sure. Did anybody else really? Okay, well, we'll make sure that that happens next time. Sorry about
We
that.
had it in our room.
Any reflections from breakout rooms?
I will share. I'm Sherry from ESU1. And we really talked about the power of setting the goal and really honing in on, like your instructional framework and how that support and that common language just really builds the pedagogy amongst the teachers that you are coaching. So yeah, love coaching and really see how it develops teachers.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Awesome. So why don't we go ahead and dig into our next segment together. So let's actually go ahead and can we have someone from the Clinton team come off mute and read our key idea for the team, please?
A well-developed teacher will ultimately lead to a well-developed student. While there are always exceptions to the rule, a teacher that is developed towards a vision for strong instruction that supports every student is not only empowering, it's equitable, sorry.
Okay, thank you so much. So with that, let's think about some of the strategies we use throughout our own process in order to make sure that our coaching conversations are as robust and rigorous as they can be for the teachers that we are developing. So, as we know, this session is within the context of a larger series of sessions. We also know that this session, as part of this series, we will have site visits to actually be on the ground, practicing using the tool and norming each other on observing in this kind of way. We also know that, a lot of us have experience already, a ton of experience that we're bringing to the table with instructional coaching. Now, even in coaching conversations that are dialogic in nature, right? Asking a lot of questions that leads the teacher to have their own key takeaway and understanding, it's still important to have an end in mind. Now, in terms of really breaking down those strategies for how to get to that end, how to ask a lot of the right kinds of questions, to take a facilitative versus directive stance, that's coming up in our next session. But for today, we're focusing on that action step that we're really trying to get to in the conversation. But in order to actually get there, we have to be able to identify for ourselves what that action step is. And I know from personal experience, when I first started coaching, I used to think I was giving really tight, firm action steps. And then I would hear someone else's action steps and I'd be like, ooh, I need to improve my directives a little bit more. So hopefully together today, we get to pressure test some of exactly that, right? How do we set an action step that's specific, that's strong, that's high leverage to actually move instruction and get there over the course of a coaching conversation? Okay, the first thing we need to do though is take better notes. And we're going to kick off some time about that today. So we are going to tackle 3 things today. That first thing is going to be exactly that, right? Practice taking low inference notes. My favorite tool in my coach's toolbox. The second thing we're going to be practicing is identifying that student level change that we want to see at the classroom. And this is really relating to that big picture, that goal, right? Are we setting robust, rigorous goals that are aligned to a tool that can actually move the needle for student outcomes? Finally, we are going to practice writing specific action steps. Again, even in conversations that are really dialogic, that's asking a lot of questions, that's trying to build teacher self-efficacy and reflection, we still have to know where that conversation is going, because now the questions we are asking are strategic to get us there. So if by having an action step already in mind, we know when our conversation is going where it needs to be, and when it's veering off the rails, we can reel it back in. So again, a dialogic approach still keeps the end in mind. So my favorite thing, low inference notes. Now, I will be fully transparent here, y'all. I was a literature teacher, so I am an annotator and a note taker by nature, but I still really do believe that low inference notes is by far the strongest tool that we have as coaches in our toolbox. So what do we mean by low inference notes? Actually, Daniel, I see you on my Zoom little strip here. Can you come off mute and read what low inference notes are for us in the green, please?
Yes. Low inference notes are observation notes, accurately describe what is taking place, who is doing / saying what, and when something is occurring. The goal is to reduce assumptions, opinions, and judgments.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Let's look at a couple of examples. So first, low inference notes are literal. And I mean it, like super literal. Your low inference notes should feel boring if you just gave your notes to, like, you know, your neighbor, like, hey, read these. They're like, why do I care about this? That's how they should feel, right? It's straightforward. Teacher, who can show me the next step in here? Students, they'll be able to start like this. And then teacher, yes, great job. You're literally just writing down, like literally, and I'm using literally. You're just writing down who's saying what's happening. Okay. Next, low inference notes are observable. S for students, you know, use your shorthands. I use S's, some people, you know, S's and T's. Some people use all kinds of stuff. Find the shorthands that work for you. Students work in triads to solve next math problem on their slate board. One triad, passing tic-tac-toe after completing problem early, right? Just observable. Some you can see, actually see with your eyes. Okay. The last thing about low inference notes is that they are quantitative. You are counting 12, and you know, and you're stamping that time. So at 12:15, 3 out of 5 groups raise their hands. 4 out of 6 students sit next to a language buddy while they work, right? Low inference. I mean, I should be able to read, like I said, this should be boring. Like they're like, okay, so what? 3/5 of groups raise their hands at 12:15. Like it should feel that dry. Here is why, though. When we think about low inference notes, what we are actually collecting is data. We are collecting neutral data that has absolutely no judgment to it. And we are using that in our conversation to just hold up a mirror. Like, because we as teachers are taking in a bajillion data points at a time, because we have a lesson, we got 52 minutes to get there, we got to do transitions, we got kids run, nosebleeds happen in the background, let me get a tissue for them. I'm a teacher, I'm doing a million things at once, right? I'm not necessarily knowing maybe that kid just passed tic-tac-toe on a sneak tip to their peer, right? But as the observer, I am, and I'm just taking note in a neutral way without any judgment. All right. So let's talk about why this is so important on our next slide. Let's go ahead and have Katie. Can you come off mute and read this in our green?
In the green?
Yes, in the green.
The goal is to reduce assumptions, opinions, and judgment. Look below at the examples of notes where inferences are being drawn about what's being observed.
Awesome. So in this situation, oftentimes, without even knowing it, little assumptions and judgments can slip their way into our notes. For example, three ELL students in class kicked off the turn and talk with the partner. How do you know they're English language learners? Like, what did you observe, see, identify to make you think that? Right, just let that sit in. How do you know? What makes you think that? Okay, next. Sometimes we see opinions in our notes. 14 students are excited and engaged by the learning that's happening in class. How do you know they're excited about what's happening in class? I mean, unless you're literally hearing, oh my gosh, this class is so exciting and awesome. I can't wait to do derivatives today. Bam, great. Write that in your notes. You know what I mean? But how do you know they're not excited about something else? How do you know they're not excited about some tea they just heard from their neighbor or from a note they just got passed? You actually have no idea about their excitement just by looking at some smiles and some giggles, right? So that is an opinion statement. Students are excited and engaged about learning happening in class. Make it neutral. 5 students are smiling, 7 students are giggling. Now we can do a little bit of mining to find out why. Well, what was going on there? Okay, last. Sometimes in our notes, we see things that can be a little judgmental. Oh, this teacher is the absolute worst at classroom management. The students in here are behaving like animals. We all know, we've all been in classrooms before where you're like, oh, it is tough to be in here and watch some of the things that's going down. And we think to ourselves, though, if our notes leaked, would we be embarrassed by something in our notes? And if the answer is yes, then there's probably something in it that was judgy, right? Again, our notes have to be neutral. They have to be literal, observable, quantifiable, because now we have data, and that data can be used supportively to say, oh my gosh, 15 out of 16 students raised their hands or had their pencils down. You said 1, 2, 3, eyes on me. Talk to me about how you set up that routine. Or you can use that same amount of data or that same data point to, you know, be challenging. Ooh, I saw 3 out of 15 of your students have their pencils down and eyes on you when you said 1, 2, 3, eyes on me. Talk to me about how you rolled out that routine. See, same question pretty much, but now I'm just using different data points to drive to the outcome that I want to see. It's harder to do that than to say, oh, your kids were not listening to you at all when you said pencil down, eyes on you. Let's talk about that. Now I feel judged. That feels different. And the tone shift in the conversation doesn't allow for that growth to be strategic anymore, right? Now I feel under the looking glass a little bit as a teacher. Okay.
Can
So
I add one quick thing to that?
Yes,
I put this in the chat, but I just wanted to name, like, everything that Nadia's just described helps if you do it regularly, like take these low inference notes and frame conversations in this way. Coaching for the teacher becomes less about getting the right score and pleasing my principal or coach, and more about, are my kids getting what they need, which is the point, right? Like, teachers shouldn't be trying to improve their practice just to get a better score. They should be trying to improve their practice to give students the education they deserve. And this feels like a small nuanced thing, but over time, if you frame conversations in this way, that's the message that you're sending, right? That improving instruction is for students and not for a score.
And it trains you and your eye and holds yourself accountable as the observer. Because if a teacher asks me, well, why, or how do you know, or why are we thinking about that? And you're like, ugh, I can't remember exactly what happened. Now I'm just talking in generalities. Well, class was a little disheveled that day, or, you know, there's a lot of disruptions. That's hard to use as evidence, as opposed to, well, during these 4 transitions, 7 students did this, 9 students did that, 12 students did this. Is that what you wanted to see during that transition? If the answer is no, then it's like, okay, great. Well, let's help get you to what you actually want to see during a transition. And it becomes, again, non-judgmental in that space. But to Namisha's point, it's a win-win for both. It helps the teacher build their lens that's student-centered, and it helps the observer build their lens that's also student-centered. Okay. Are there any questions before we give you some time to just process? Okay, we'll take some time to process. In your handout, there's a stop and chat. How can low inference note-taking be a tool for more rigorous debrief conversations? And thinking about some of the pitfalls, how might low inference note-taking be a tool for building and reinforcing our lens for equity? And if you have to pick one of these 2 in the time that we have, I really want to push you, especially for that second bullet, really think about, ooh, what traps do I then get to avoid by taking low inference notes. Give yourself a silent 2 minutes to stop and jot.
I don't know if this is the group I'm in with all you guys or not. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I didn't get a breakout
Oh,
session.
we're not in breakout rooms. This is just a quick stop and jot in your handout. We're still in the main room because we're just gonna go into a break. So you're good. Take about 1 more minute to reflect in your handout. Awesome. So hopefully you've gotten some beautiful reflections and you feel motivated to push yourselves to do low inference notes if that's not already an integral part to your practice, which I'm, sure it is. But let's go ahead and move into a break. Let's give ourselves 10 minutes to process, think through the information we've gotten so far together today, and then we'll come back together to do some practice.
All right, welcome back. Let's get back into it. Hopefully you had time to grab another cup of coffee if you're like me. So before the break, Nadia was talking to us about low inference notes. Now we're going to do some super quick, snappy practice on identifying low inference notes. So on the next several slides, you are going to see snippets of an observer's notes. And you're going to decide whether these examples of notes are or are not low inference. So when we get to the slide, I'll read out the prompt. And then as soon as the prompt is read, Nadia is going to open up a Zoom poll and you will have 10 seconds to just quickly answer yes or no on that Zoom poll. Yes, these notes are low inference. No, these notes are not low inference. Are we ready? Okay. Prompt number 1. 15 out of 20 students were engaged and excited about learning. These are not low inference. They're not low inference. There's that engaged and excited piece. They're almost low inference. There's student numbers here, right? But what evidence do we have that kids are engaged or excited, right? That's what we're looking for. All right, practice number 2. 10 students start writing on their handouts when the teacher says, go. we put these timers in there and it still scares me every time. 100% correct here. Yes, this is low inference. Snappy practice number 3. All right, this one's kind of long. At 10:18, a student says, I think that Sidney Carton is more of a hero than Charles Darnay was throughout the novel. Teacher says, why do you think this is? Student, because he sacrificed more than Charles and the rest of the characters. At 10:19, the teacher says, everyone, take 15 seconds to think of an example of self-sacrifice that supports Corey's argument. Waits, now turn and talk, share your example, and explain what was being sacrificed. 10:22, 18 out of 22 students have shared or agreed and spoken during the turn and talk. These are, in fact, low inference. All of this is just naming exactly what the observer saw happening in the classroom. There's no element here where there is judgment. One last piece of practice. Teacher says, pencils down in 3, 2, 1. Now let's look at the problem we just did independently. 2 students are being disrespectful while teacher is going over the answer. Yes, most of us got it. This is not low inference. The first part is, so you might have gotten thrown off by that. The first bullet is low inference. It's just what the teacher is saying. The second part, what evidence do we have that kids are being disrespectful? That's what we want to write down. That kid, X number of students are off task or something like that. Not just kids are being disrespectful. All right, before we move on to our next piece, are there any questions about low inference notes? Speak now, or don't forever hold your peace. You can always ask your questions later. Okay, let's move into our next piece. So in a few slides, we are going to practice this process of observing and taking low inference notes by watching a video, and we're going to pretend we're in this teacher's classroom in real life. But before we do that, since it's been a few weeks since our last session and you may not be actively using the core rubric between sessions yet, we want to give you a couple of minutes here to just re-familiarize yourself with the tool that we're going to be using while observing. So take about 2 to 3 minutes right now to open up that core teaching rubric. It's linked in your participant handout, and it's also on the Google Classroom. And just kind of skim through it and re-identify yourself with the 4 domains.
Awesome. And while y'all are doing that, Noella, if you want to ask your question, feel free.
No, my question was more of a, I guess, a response and like how detailed it we need to be.
Yeah. And why is that?
Again, so like you're getting the true picture, right? Like we're not making assumptions or judgments, and yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming off mute and sharing that. We appreciate it.
Take 30 seconds. Find a good stopping place. Okay, so to be doubly sure that we're all on the same page and using the same language when we talk about this observation, take one more minute now to just scan over this slide that we are calling our sort of core rubric cheat sheet. This kind of gives you the highlights for each of the 4 domains. What is the ideal state? Does anyone have any clarifying questions about the tool that you feel like might hinder your ability to use the tool if we don't talk about it right now? Okay. Oh, I thought someone was going to come off mute. Noella, you thinking about it? Noella's like, maybe I have a question. Sorry, go ahead.
My question goes back to like, so when we're talking about coaching, so that we're all on the same page, because I mean, the process is good communication between you and the teacher. And again, the expectations. So, I mean, that's kind of, I think, to me, that's got to be very clearly defined before you even coach. There always has to be those pre-meetings and ensuring that, again, we're on the same page, because there should be no hidden agenda between you and us and your teacher in terms of, what it is as a the one of the administrative leaders, in coming into these classrooms, right? Because I mean, I think the goal in mind is that the teacher knows that they're going to be supported, regardless if we make mistakes. I mean, so I just wanted to make sure that I'm coming in knowing that I've had this pre-meeting with my teacher, right? Is that kind of, or
Yeah,
no?
absolutely. And just to like, one other thing too, and Amisha, I'll definitely let you layer in too. And all I was going to say is, this is part of like different leadership styles and change, like relationships to change management and transparent communication with their staff. Because like you're naming too, a lot of folks are coming in with baggage, whether they have had prior relationships where it wasn't coaching, it was punitive, it was about the rating, it was about whether you're renewed or non-renewed, etc. And in order to shift towards this, there has to be kind of an open, let's level set, let's kind of wipe the slate a little clean here and really be transparent about what it is that we're doing when we come into your rooms, right? Evaluation sits in this bucket over here, and observations for evaluation sit in this bucket over here. But what we're doing is coaching. Here's the rubric, here's a tool, let's look at it together, let's have a meeting, let's norm on it, blah, 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 so that everybody feels safe, like you're saying, because without that safety being in place, it'll be really hard to be able to be in people's rooms freely. But then go ahead and tie it back to the cycle, Namisha.
Yeah, I was just gonna say where we're hanging out right now in this session is kind of in these like first 2 steps, like once you observe kind of for you mentally identifying for yourself the teacher strengths and growth areas, or the lesson strengths and growth areas. But a step that's not on here that you're naming, Noella, is like before even the initial diagnostic. If coaching is like brand new for your school, yeah, you should probably prep people for this before just like showing up in their classroom and hanging out for the whole class period, right? So thank you for naming that. That's not part of this cycle because this cycle is just zooming in on like once you've started the coaching process. But yes, ideally you might not get, I don't want to say invest everybody because you might not get everybody invested just by sharing, hey, we're going to do this. For some people, it'll take doing a few cycles, maybe even a whole year of cycles for them to be truly invested. But you do want to just tell people what's coming up front.
Yeah, and I think that's the reality that we're in right now, Sean and myself, is that, you know, as new administrators and, you know, trying to, you know, encourage staff and that's one of the big main key common you know, conversations is always like, you got to be also vulnerable, like you got to tell us your needs too. But I mean, that's all part of this whole coaching piece too. And like a lot of them said, they've not had anybody come in and have those kind of observations done or coaching. Yeah, so definitely.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. We touched on some of these concepts a little bit in our first session as well. So if you ever want to go back to all those materials that are on Google Classroom, the slides are there, the resources are there. If you just want some guidance on like gauging the culture and climate and how to respond to that. Okay, let's get back into this observation. We're going to take a couple of minutes before we observe to look at the standard, the text, and the teacher's lesson plan. It's all on this slide. It's also on your handout if the slide is hard for you to read. So take just 1 or 2 minutes right now to skim over what's the target standard, what text are they reading, and what has the teacher planned. The things I want to highlight is that the standard for this lesson focuses on students comprehending grade level text independently. And I just want to get out of the way that this text is grade appropriate. It's actually recommended for 9th grade, but that makes it appropriate for 8th grade. It's a rich, meaty text with lots of themes that kids can dig into. Are there any questions about the lesson plan, the standard, or the text before we observe? Okay. In your participant handout, you have a link to a note-taking template that you can use during this observation. You don't have to use this template, but we do encourage it just so that you're prepared to it helps you organize your thoughts in a way that might make it easier for you to share when we're in breakout rooms after the video. This template we think is useful because it gives you space to capture low inference notes based on teacher actions and student actions. And then it also includes an editable version of that core rubric so that you can be like highlighting your initial ratings for each indicator if that makes it easier for you. After we watch the video, we are going to ask you to submit your ratings for each indicator on the rubric via a Google form. So highlighting them on this template might be helpful for you. Any questions? All righty. Let me turn off this pen. Okay, we're about to step into Mr. C's 8th grade ELA classroom. Remember to take low inference notes.
This year, one of our objectives, one of the standards, is that you guys, by the end of the school year, are able to read and comprehend literature independently and proficiently. Maybe the key word there, and I think some of you guys will have this on your text, some of you guys won't, is independently. Okay, up till this point, Lino, a lot of our instruction, a lot of the reading has been done either by myself in small groups or listening to it as a whole group. Okay, we're going to shift that model to where you guys are doing most of the reading. But in order for that model to be successful, you guys have to have all the tools. And what is the number one thing you guys need to do to be successful independent readers? Annotate. Okay? So we're going to review what that looks like, because I've seen a massive drop off in quality of annotation, and that's going to be key, especially for some of you readers who are readers like when I was a kid. That's going to be key for you guys to be successful. All right. So, why annotation? How does it help us out? You guys want to give it to me? How does it help us out? Go ahead, tell me.
We don't have to go through the whole book and find the main idea, and it's already highlighted.
Okay, so thank you. You're kind of stealing my thunder a little bit, but one of the things it does for us, and this is going to be something you're going to see in both high school, college, and hopefully beyond, you're creating a reference tool for yourself. When you read a text, you're not just going to be reading it for fun, all right? You're going to be asked to do something with it 9 times out of 10. One of those things is usually going to be writing. So you're creating a reference tool for yourself. Okay, I can go back and I need to focus on, say, imagery. I need to focus on, Lino?
Foreshadowing.
Yes, on foreshadowing or irony or whatever it happens to be. You've got that labeled in your text. Okay, what's another reason that we do it?
For deeper understanding.
A deeper understanding of the text. Okay. And think you guys are totally stealing my thunder here, and that's okay. For a deep understanding of the text, when you guys talk to your book, when you guys make note of important literary elements, whether it be, like my favorite one, repetition, whether it be foreshadowing, whether it be rising actions, like story, literary elements such as that, and literary devices, you guys are getting a deeper understanding of the text. You're reading meaningfully. You're reading purposefully. You're looking for stuff. You're not just letting it wash over you passively. Guys, the final thing, and I'm going to take this one, because this is why I had to start doing it, especially in college, is it helps you stay engaged. You guys, we've talked about it a billion times. In front of you is the world's worst student. I was awful. I would drift off when I read. I would drift off whenever I did anything. You and I, Yaya, are like twins, all right? I would just sit here, I'd start off good, I'd start off well, I'd start looking at my text, and then I was off, okay? When you are annotating, it helps you stay engaged with your work, okay? It helps you stay engaged with the text, in addition to all those other things. So that's why we do it, guys. Okay, so we've been down this road before, but I want to give us a little refresher. Please put this in front of you now. And I want you to take a moment just to review it, okay? So that just means to browse it. Please focus on the literary side, because that's what we're going to be working with today. Take 1 minute just to review it. Although there was evening brightness showing through the windows of the bunkhouse, inside it was dusk. Through the open door came the thuds and occasional clangs of a horseshoe game, and now and then the sounds of voices raised in approval or derision. Well, first of all, that's beautiful. Beautiful. Okay, the imagery there is fantastic. And then I see this. the word derision. That's a tough word. And now and then, the sounds of voices raised in approval or derision. So they're playing horseshoes. So they're either saying that's wonderful, I know what approval means, they like it, or, and then disapproval. So that or is going to imply the opposite. And that brings me to something I forgot, guys, and forgive me for interrupting the read. But looking for words that you don't know and applying your context clues is right up there with identifying literary elements, okay? Because it can cause your understanding of the text to crumble. Let's keep going. Slim and George came into the darkening bunkhouse together. Slim reached up over the card table and turned on the tin-shaded electric light. Instantly, the table was brilliant with light, and the cone of the shade threw its brightness straight downward, leaving the corners of the bunkhouse still in dusk. Slim sat down in the box, and George took his place opposite. I see a couple of, I know from my archetypes, I see a couple of references to darkness. Can imply mystery or danger. But I'll put a question mark because I don't want to assume anything. It wasn't nothing. Anything else we can draw? Can we draw anything about character? What do you see? What does that tell you about the characters? Maria.
Lenny isn't aggressive.
Beautiful.
Here are your shoes. Here is your coat.
Okay. Anything else? Anything about George?
Not that bright.
Where do you see that?
How he didn't like get the jokes and all that, and how he didn't really realize.
Oh, so it's hard to. So it's. I think you're talking about Lenny.
Yeah.
So remember, Lenny's the big guy. Okay, you're talking about Lenny. Okay, so Lenny's not that bright. Okay, yeah, definitely not the sharpest tool in the shed. Didn't get the jokes. Can we say anything about George?
He likes to pick on him.
So we kind of, again, this idea of
That woman.
George, you know, he's cruel. Or at least there's that potential for cruelty in him, Caprice. Cruel, aggressive. In many ways, the opposite of the cut. With his hands, but he never lifted a finger against me. George's voice was taking on the tone of confession. I'm going to try that to godlike. Tell you what made me stop that? One day a bunch of guys was standing around up on the Sacramento River. I was feeling pretty smart. I turned to Lenny and says, "Jump in," and he jumps. Couldn't swim a stroke. He damn near drowned before we could get him. And he was so damn nice to me for pulling him out.
That's actually pretty cool.
Chilano.
What'd you say?
That's pretty cool.
You should write that down.
Chilano.
Yes.
Isn't like his obedience a little bit too dangerous? Because he just basically just said 3 words to jump in, and he just did it like it was nothing, even though he couldn't swim.
So there's that, he's too obedient, okay? So it's going too far, and that leaves him vulnerable, decidedly. And, what did you say?
He can't take it though. He can't take it, but like he doesn't understand the full outcome.
He just doesn't get it. Sorry, let me just jump here. Please stop. And Angel, I appreciate you don't need to finish again. Can you just share with me some of the things that you highlighted? So I'm going to call you some of you that I haven't heard from yet. Angel, beautiful.
I highlighted a red dress.
So where do you see it yet again on this page?
Yes.
Where and at the top? Oh, I see it too. So you know what? I see it here, but I'm not going to try to keep up with you. Go ahead. What else did you see?
Adding on to Angel, it doesn't just say red dress. It specifically says that red dress. which caught me. It was like, well, to me, it was like it's not, maybe the color means something, or I don't know.
Yeah,
But
maybe.
it's just like that red dress.
Okay.
Like it kind of made me wonder.
And so how did you, this is, see, so how did you notate that?
I just
you
put
like
a
s-
question mark because I didn't really know what, like,
Uh-huh.
I don't know, like, just that part, that red dress.
Okay, but, okay, so I guess what I'm saying is, I see that you actually didn't really put anything, so maybe you could like put a square around the word that. Okay, because that's a really valid point, question. Go ahead, Xavier.
I have an idea.
Hit me with an idea.
I think that maybe the woman with the dress that Ronnie touched the weed, I think that might be Curly's wife.
Do you think that the woman in weed and that this woman might be the same person?
Yeah.
Did you write that down in the column?
That's smart.
Write that, very nice, it is smart. Okay, hold on. Now, I want to stay focused. I do not want to argue that point. Okay, we can go back to that tomorrow.
At the end, like close to like where the little line you put for us to stop eating.
Yep.
It's like, sure he's just like a kid. There ain't no more harm in him than a kid either. There's like, except he's so strong.
Except he's so strong. Caprice, did you have anything else on that page? Something different that we haven't talked about? Okay. Go ahead, Dave.
Something that I noticed was just like before, where George asked him about the pup, and he like says he didn't have a pup, like he's trying to hide him, just like he did with the mouse.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the story.
Nice. That's a great connection to a prior event. And I want to close. Is this about the story?
Yeah, no, it's because I'm connecting pieces.
Bill. 1 second.
I kind of, I don't know, Maria said like about that red dress, maybe like the red like a trigger for him. Basically
Like a bull.
Yeah, or like
I mean, for lack of a better term.
in addition, I had like Lenny's gonna like want to test like Curly White's red dress, and like she gonna get scared and scream, and like the girl in the weed did.
Did you write that prediction down? Fine, no, okay. No, so instead of sharing with just Angel, share with us. Ugo, what you got?
It's about things about Curly's, and that it might be the Curly's wife. I said maybe it would, maybe if Lenny meets her, maybe the lady again.
Yep.
Maybe she'll remember what he did and tell Curly about it, and then that might lead to conflict.
Okay, did you write that down in the margin?
No, I'm about to write it down.
Of course you are. Angel.
Oh, I was good. Like right after where it says, I didn't mean no harm, when George found the pup, and he said, I didn't mean no harm, George, honest, I didn't, I just wanted to pet a little bit, a little, I thought that was like a sign of innocence, or, yeah.
A what?
A sign of
A
innocence.
sign of innocence. Fantastic. I couldn't agree more. Last one, Maria.
Two things.
Okay.
The thing that you said about the wolf baby is like his strength, and that what Mariah said that the color red triggered him, and that Slim, when he said that he's just like a kid, ain't he? It's like I find him suspicious.
Okay.
Because he's like very, as soon as George told him it's past, he seemed very like interested into
I'm
Lenny.
sorry, so I want to make clear, you find Slim suspicious.
Yeah.
Okay, we talked about that too. We're not, did you write that? Okay, fantastic, guys. So I don't want, forgive me, so we got it, because we have one other activity to do today, and it's really important. Again, so this is what mine looked like when I was reading it last night. This is what I did. You don't want to get so absorbed in the process that you don't know what you've read. You're reading one of the classics of literature, one of the best books of all time. You don't want to get so absorbed in writing every little detail down that you lose the flow. Does that make sense? Okay, but I think this is a pretty good sample of what it should look like.
Okay, before we talk about it, we're going to give you 5 minutes just on your own to kind of process, gather your notes about what you just observed, and use the link that we'll drop it in the chat, but it's also in your participant handout. There's a link to a Google form where we'd love for you to submit your ratings of this 15-minute observation. There's no right or wrong answer. You're not going to get like an A+ or C- or something when you submit your responses. Just go with your gut, and you only have 5 minutes, so don't like overanalyze. Just go with your gut. We'll get a ton more practice using this tool throughout our sessions this year and during regional site visits. So for now, just go with your gut, submit those ratings, and we'll head into breakout rooms in 5 minutes. I think 2 more minutes. And we've got 23 responses in, so I'm going to give us 1 more minute for a few stragglers to get their scores in. Okay, in a moment, we are going to open up some breakout rooms where we'd love for you to take a few minutes there. We'll give you a decent chunk of time to chat about this observation and share your reflections on what you observed. What are you starting to identify as potential strengths and areas of growth based on what you observed? And try to provide specific evidence from your low inference notes as much as possible to support what you're sharing with your group. And then with your group, also talk about, based on the areas of growth that you identified, what's the student level outcome that you would want to see in Mr. C's classroom? So share strengths and growth areas, and then talk about the student level outcome you want to see in his classroom. All right, let's open up breakouts.
Namisha or Nadia, would you put me in a breakout as well? Thank you.
Okay, let's do a little bit of whole group sharing. Would love to hear from a few folks. Did this conversation with your colleagues, just kind of like calibrating and norming on what you saw, did it change your perspective on any of your ratings? And or were there any areas that you guys disagreed on?
We kind of talked about, we were fairly similar. Some of us rated it just slightly higher, but we also talked about like it is hard at the end of the day to observe, because like we weren't there seeing what all of the students, we didn't have that full picture of we knew that there was 22 students, but we couldn't see it. And then, you know, we would have the black screen that would say, oh, they took this long and did this activity. It was hard for us to see that student ownership and what was happening during that time. And so it, to us, like it kind of appeared very instruction heavy and that the students didn't have tons of opportunity, but that's because that was the only part that we got to see. So it is always hard where I think maybe some of our discrepancies was more of just the situation of how we're viewing it, but not necessarily, I feel like we would have been really close had we been actually in the room with us three together looking at it.
But based on what you saw, you guys agree that like student ownership was not as high as it could be.
Yeah. And we also talked too about just some of like the missed opportunities. Like there was a point where he said, a student responded, he was like, did you write that down? He was like, you should do that. Another teacher or another student said, oh, that was really smart. And he was like, yeah, it was, but we aren't going to like kind of debate about that point right now. And because he was like, you know, we have other activities, and like that is such our teacher mindset where like in our head we have our lesson plans, we're watching the time, we're watching the clock, we're trying to manage moving our pace along, but it's like that would have been such a great opportunity for that student ownership to really be there, because then students could have been talking, they could have been using academic language. He could have said, well, what do other people's have in their notes? And we just kind of pointed out that there was a lot of opportunities like that throughout the lesson where like it wasn't bad, but there was a lot of like little opportunities that if he would have just tweaked or changed, the impact on students could have been really big.
Thank you. Let's hear from at least one other person.
We talked about the missed opportunities for children to talk to each other and to engage as a whole group in whole group responses versus just the individual responses that he gained to, first of all, allow students to talk about their thinking with others, but then also for the students just to be more engaged than they actually were.
Yeah, how many times did you see a turn and talk? 0. Yeah, I'm just naming that as like that's a low inference, just like number, right? 0 opportunities. I mean, you probably wouldn't say it like that to a teacher, but yes, that's 0 opportunities for kids to turn and talk with each other. Did anyone have thoughts on the focus of the lesson? Did anyone talk about that? The focus of the lesson being annotating. Or does anyone have thoughts now that I'm directly asking that question?
We talked about the focus appeared during the gradual release to be annotation, but then switched to analysis. And we wondered about that transition and how students knew if they were on track with annotation and or analysis with 100% checks for understanding at some point that we did not feel like we saw.
You for sharing. The reason I'm pointing that out, we don't need to get into like the nuances of accurate rating because that's not the point of this, but I do want to name the standard for a line to this lesson is that students can read and comprehend literature independently. There is no standard that is about how to annotate. So I just want to name, like, that's something to just, if you didn't think about that, it can be helpful to like go back to the standards to think about what you're observing. And it's just something to wonder, should the point of this lesson have been about how to annotate, or should it have been about using annotation to better understand the text? Which could change what the teacher is, like when students were sharing out, like that red dress, the feedback he gave her was put a box around the word that, not, why do you think that might be important? Why do you think the author is like zeroing in on that, right? So just another plug for like going back to the standard and like the purpose of the lesson as well. Okay, we're gonna take a break and then we'll come back and keep talking about this one observation. We're actually gonna do a 5-minute break just to catch up on a little bit of lost time. So let's come back at 11:01. See you soon.
At this point in our morning together, we are going to do some practicing around identifying that high impact lever, right? So you all talked in your small groups about, well, what is the outcome that we really want to be seeing in Mr. C's class? And now we're going to help like narrow that down into some action language that we would be thinking about when we go into a conversation with Mr. Salam or Mr. C. Okay, so with that, we have an analogy that we hope is helpful for us to think about when we talk about identifying this lever. So for anyone who's been to Paris, then it's likely you have visited the Arc de Triomphe. And getting to this location might have been honestly easier than expected, because once you reach the landmark, it becomes pretty clear that there are many major roads that leads you to this central place. But what if you're coming from the Galleria or the concert venue in the Northwest? The road you take to get to the Arc will vary depending on your starting point. And that's why we love this analogy, because instructional coaching can feel really similar, right? You know your vision for strong instruction is at the center. And you know that all roads ultimately lead to that vision, the different pieces of feedback you give, the action steps you provide, the goals you set, etc. However, ultimately, the domain and indicator and even action steps you choose for that teacher or work with that teacher to establish will vary depending on that particular teacher's starting point. So the road you will pick will have to be strategic depending on where that teacher is coming from. Because yes, all roads might lead to the vision, but you still want to be thinking about which road is best given where we are. Okay. So with that, let's do some practice. So we're going to be using Mr. C's class as our central, as our starting point. We're all talking about Mr. C's class. And step one, we're going to break down these steps and give us dedicated chunks of time to process and plan. All this process and planning can happen in your participant handout. So make sure you're in that section of the handout to be tracking some of that thinking. Okay, here we're going to take 3 minutes to think to ourselves, what domain do you want to push Mr. C in, right? Which of the 4? You may be tempted to say things like, well, I don't know this teacher well enough, and I don't know how much experience do they have. Is he a 20-year teacher? Is he a first-year teacher? I don't know. Listen, think about a teacher you have on your staff that you want to practice this process with, and imagine Mr. C has that teacher's experience, that teacher's disposition, that teacher's personality, right? So just transplant this classroom onto a teacher that feels within reach that you can use as an example. Okay. So ask yourself the following questions to help you choose a domain to focus on for Mr. C. We'll give you about 3 minutes, and I'll pick back up when it's time to move on to our next step. We're in our whole group, just in your handout. What domain are you going to pick? Give yourself 3 minutes to choose. Take 1 more minute to identify which of the 4 domains are you going to prioritize for Mr. C's development. Okay, awesome. Now it's time for our next step. Again, we're going to spend about 3 minutes here. And this time we're going to zoom in on the indicator level. So now that you've picked the domain that you want to focus on for Mr. C, what indicator are you going to be focusing on for Mr. C as well? So again, 3 minutes here, same types of questions. Which indicator do you think needs the most attention? Is there one that will spark a domino effect to improve others, etc.? Take about 1 more minute. Yeah, which indicator, which of those rows are you going to focus on for Mr. C? Okay, so now you've picked your domain. You've picked the indicator that you want to support Mr. C on. Now it's time to start thinking about how to get there. So, as you know, underneath each domain instead of indicators, there are core teacher skills. So I know some folks might have joined a little bit late. So if you don't have the PDF, we'll make sure we share the link to the folder in a sec. But the core teacher skills are some of those strategies or things that need to be in place in order to be able to successfully meet the expectations of the different indicators in the tool. So as we kicked off last time, for those of us who are present, you can make any of these tools work to tie your shoelaces, right? But we want to use our hands because that's just easiest. So same thing here. Consider where this teacher is in their development. Consider how flexible they are. Consider what skill sets they already are bringing to the table, what their experience is. You know, again, we're pretending that you have a teacher in mind already from your context that you know really well. Use that to help you think, okay, which core teacher skill can I pick to help us get to the indicator, to the growth in the indicator that I've just selected. So it'll take about 3 minutes. Scan those core teacher skills. Which one? Maybe 2, but don't go crazy. No more than like 2 are you going to prioritize for Mr. C? And if you haven't seen, Amisha did drop a link to the note catcher in the chat. The last page of that note catcher has all the core teacher skills organized by domain. So if you want just a quick one-stop shop, click that link in the chat. Take another 30 seconds to identify your core teacher skill or skills that you're going to prioritize for Mr. C's class. All right, now let's put, I was gonna say pen to paper, but fingers to keyboards and synthesize all this work that you just did. So if you had to think about a goal, right, that you would ideally help support Mr. C in coming to, what goal would you want to set up with Mr. C to get to the student level outcome that you named earlier in your group? If you're like, ooh, I would like to see X% increase in blah, or more blank opportunities for whatever. So get specific. You all are pros at writing goals, and you know they have to be measurable, time bound, etc. Use that same brain or use that same lens. What goal would you ideally want to set with Mr. C to get to the student level change you want to see in that class? Take a few minutes here and jot down that goal in your handout. This will come in handy in a couple of slides, so make sure you write down your goals. I'm looking at y'all. Don't overthink your goals. Take about 30 more seconds. If you're ready, you could put a little ready in the chat so that we know. But take 30 more seconds to like jot down that goal. Hold yourselves accountable, write it down, because it will come in handy in a few more slides. Okay, it's time to see what these goals are doing for Mr. C's class. Go ahead, Namisha.
Okay, Nadia will come for you. I'm just kidding. Okay, we are now going to get into actually crafting a strong action step for Mr. C based on all of that thinking that Nadia just walked us through. But first, I'm gonna watch a quick video. We're sure that some people on this call have seen this video before, but just in case, it is not only an adorable video, but we promise it is relevant for this part of our time together. So even though we're not talking about, in this section, we're not talking about giving specific directions, we are talking about getting super specific and clear. So we're gonna watch like a minute of this video and drop in the chat at any point in the video, what's the key takeaway that you're getting from this segment of the video?
You're not making any sense. Sorry, you ruined it on purpose.
You know what? I'm hungry. I could really go for a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Do you guys think you can write down some instructions and teach me how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich?
Yeah. I'm done.
Step 1. Get 2 pieces of bread out. Got 'em. Get a butter knife and get some PB. Take 1 piece of bread, spread it around with the butter knife.
No, Dad, with the peanut butter.
I'm just doing what it says. It says take 1 piece of bread, spread it around with the butter knife.
Hold on.
Get some jelly, rub it on the other half of the bread.
No, Dad, open the jelly.
Well, it doesn't say to do that. Put the breads together on top of each other. Take a big bite. This doesn't taste like a peanut butter jelly sandwich. Fail.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I had to make it extremely specific.
Oh, good. I'm starving. Take 2 pieces of white bread out of the bag. Take the lid off the jar of peanut butter. Get a butter knife and stick it inside of the peanut butter jar. With the knife, scoop a bit of peanut butter out
A bit,
of
that means like a lot.
A bit means a lot?
In my world.
All right. There we go.
Doing better than before, though.
Open the jelly jar. Squeeze it onto the other piece of bread.
No.
Done. Closer.
All right, we're gonna pause there. I see Dave added a takeaway. Let's hear from a few other people. What's your takeaway from this video? Aside from maybe like, my children are also like that. Yes, clarity, even to the point of like you think you're over explaining, can make a huge difference. And clarity is kind, right? We are making people's lives easier when we are as clear as we possibly can be with them. Thank you guys for sharing and engaging in that cute little video.
You're not.
Nope, we're not gonna watch that again. Okay, so before we get into writing action steps, we do want to first distinguish between a goal, which is something that you just drafted, and an action step, which you are about to draft. So goals define the outcome that we're driving towards. So like Nadia mentioned earlier, each coaching cycle has a goal or a couple of goals that we're constantly striving towards to get those bigger picture student level outcomes. What do we want to see? So as leaders, we probably all have plenty of experience writing goals, right? What is the ultimate outcome we want to see? And we just spent some time doing that for Mr. C's classroom. Now let's talk about action steps. Action steps are where we define what needs to happen and what steps need to be taken to get closer toward that goal. So let's look at some examples. A goal could be increase the amount of classroom instruction that is spent on grade level content by reducing the time spent on transitions by at least 30%. That's a goal. That's an ultimate outcome we want to see. An action step to help a teacher get to that goal could sound something like, for the first 2 weeks, use positive narration and a projected timer during every major transition. I'd love to hear from a couple of folks. You can just come off mute to share. What could be the impact on instruction if teachers are given goals but never given action steps?
I think it goes back to clarity, back to that video. If you just give a goal, it can be interpreted several different ways. So then there's several different paths to getting to that goal. But if you have action step, it brings cohesion, it brings clarity, and it makes sure that everybody's on the same team.
Another thing might be the goal could be, we all know we want them to be able to comprehend the text, like in his class. However, I, as a teacher, I don't know how to get them there. I don't know. If I knew, I wouldn't need you to coach me on that particular, I don't know, goal. But I need you or someone else to be the one to give me the down and dirty, step by step. How can I accomplish that goal? Otherwise, I'd already be doing it.
Yes, thank you both so much for sharing. You like hit the nail on the head. I think sometimes all of us, I'm sure, have experienced moments where we feel really hesitant to give an action step or direct feedback because it feels aggressive or like mean, or we're worried we're going to like offend somebody. But a lot of the times when we don't give that action step, we might actually be causing more frustration in the other person because we're saying like, hey, like this could be better. Good luck. Bye. Right? Like we're not helping them figure out how to make it better, which can lead to more confusion. So we just wanted to harp on this for a little bit, just to name that, like, giving an action step to a struggling teacher or someone who like not even struggling, like there's like a clear space for improvement for the student experience. It isn't how you frame it. Like an action step doesn't need to be given in a way that sounds any kind of like judgy or offensive, right? It's all about what's the best use of teachers' time in preparing for a lesson and how is that going to impact the student experience. Okay, so what goes into a strong action step? Now we're just zooming straight into the action step piece. There are three big things to think about when developing a strong action step. It should be highest leverage. So you should think about, will this help the teacher to develop the most quickly and effectively toward whatever goal you've identified? It should be clear and measurable. Can anyone understand the action step? Can you easily measure and observe it and see if the teacher has made an improvement? And what evidence will you have of mastery? And then finally, an action step should be bite-sized. Can the teacher make the change in 1 week or a day or a coaching cycle? Is the action step small enough to be accomplished? So we're gonna look at an example and then we're gonna do some quick practice on action steps. So here is kind of a continuum of an action step that starts out too high and then how it can be made more specific and targeted. So the too high version of this action step: ask questions that have students do the heavy lifting of the lesson. If a teacher is not already asking questions that ask kids to do the heavy lifting, they probably don't know what those questions are, right? So this isn't specific enough. Still a little too high, but getting better is try asking questions that are a higher DOK in the next lesson. A little more specific. But an even better version of this action step: in your next lesson, pick 3 text-dependent questions from the curriculum for students to write their responses to. Set a timer for each question and circulate to make sure students are citing evidence to support their conclusions. This action step gives the teacher a very clear pathway to success. Let's do some practice. Take the next 2 minutes. In your handout, you have a space for you to write your improved action step for this sequence. You have a too high version, a still too high version, and then you have space to draft your better version. If you want feedback or you just want like another set of eyes on what you're drafting, feel free to pop it in the chat. Nadia and I will do our best to respond to you as many as we can. We're ready. Yeah, 1 more minute. Feel free to pop it in the chat. We're waiting to give you some feedback if you want it. All right, for the sake of time, I'm going to keep us moving, but Nadia, I see a couple of comments in the chat. Nadia will be responding to those as we move on. And this is just something for you to think about, if this exercise was tricky for you, that's a really good like realization and reflection for you to have. And for you to kind of take away thinking about, if it was hard for me to like identify a specific action step, why might that be? What kind of support do I maybe need to like feel more confident with this? So just something for you to think about if this was hard for you. And it's totally okay if it was, but you got to know what you need to ask for help with, right? Okay, now we are going to get some time to write an action step for Mr. C. You have a link to a Padlet in your participant handout. I will also put it in the chat in just a moment. We're going to give you about 5 minutes right now to write an action step specific for Mr. C, whose classroom we observed earlier, and align it to the goal that you identified before the break. So what was the goal you wanted to see, the student level goal, and what action step are you going to give him to start getting to that goal? And then be prepared to share your action step with a couple other folks and to give and get feedback. Are there any questions about what we're working on? Okay, take 5 minutes to independently craft your action step and post it to the Padlet. About 2 more minutes. All right, in just a second, we're going to send you back to breakouts to take turns sharing the action step that you drafted. And you might not have time to have everybody share. So just kind of go through the cycle for as many people as you can. Share your action step, and then everyone else in the group, think about if you were Mr. C receiving that action step. Does it feel highest leverage for you? Is that clear? Does it feel measurable and clear enough for you to act on it? And does it feel bite-sized for you? Yeah, Nadia, go ahead.
Yeah, when you go into your breakout rooms, to help with that, in case not everybody has a chance to voice over, copy and paste your action step into the chat. So at least everybody has a chance to read it, even if you don't have a chance to dig in and discuss it. So at least copy and paste your action step into the chat when you're in your breakout room so that just your group sees it.
I think everyone's back. Okay. We are not going to have any folks share for the sake of time, but if you want more feedback or you have follow-up questions on the action step you drafted or this process, reach out to us. We're happy to give you like one-on-one feedback if that's kind of how you learn best. But we want to take the last chunk of time just getting you a little bit of a head start on your pre-work or your, I guess, post-work from this session. So between today and whatever regional site visit you're attending, we're asking you to practice this whole process, basically. So practice observing at least 3 classrooms over the next several weeks using the core rubric. And then we will post in Google Classroom a form for you to submit your ratings. It'll look very much like the one you practiced with today. And to submit whatever action step you would give the teacher. You don't need to, unless you want to, directly give the action step to the teacher. This pre-work is really just you observing and then identifying, like in your own head, what would be the action step. If you want to try giving it to the teacher and seeing how it goes, that is a-okay. Like it's up to you and your relationship and like what you're comfortable with. So to give you a little bit of a head start on this pre-work, we're going to give you we'll do 3 minutes, not a lot of time, but we'll give you 3 minutes right now to just think about get a head start. Like, what are the 3 classrooms that you think you might want to observe? Identify those for yourself. And then if you're ready to, like, if you know which teachers you want to observe, open up your calendar or scheduler or wherever you organize your life and start plugging in. When am I going to communicate to this teacher? What day or week am I going to try to pop in? When am I going to submit the ratings, etc. So take 3 minutes to just start getting that in your schedule.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent for the week of scheduling. The week of November 2nd, right? Gives me a lot of flexibility.
Take one more minute here. Okay, we are going to share in a couple of minutes. I'll share a quick update about the regional site visits. But before we formally close out, we want to give you some time to take our session survey for today. Just sort of your exit survey, both feedback for us and just to a space for you to synthesize kind of your learning for today. So take the next 5 minutes to get as much of this survey done as possible. If you don't finish, excuse me, if you don't finish, that's okay. Just keep that window open and come back to it sometime today when you get a couple extra minutes. But take 5 minutes right now to get started on that exit survey. keep those survey responses coming. Nadia and I are like reading them in real time. And it's super helpful. And I put this in the chat, but I'll just name like, you can always give us like specific action steps as well. Like we really do. We value your feedback also. Like we want to know how we can make this learning even better and more useful for you. So keep it coming. I'm seeing some great suggestions around like pacing and time. We love all of that. Okay, quick note about site visits. And I will preface this by saying I'm going to send all of this out via an email. So I'm just quickly touching on it, but look for an email with more specifics about these regional site visits. I want to highlight 2 changes to the schedule. We are moving the November 28th site visit. We are splitting into 2 different days. So that we can get to 2 different schools and have just smaller groups of attendees. So we're not having like 10 people trying to go into a classroom. So we do have, we'll be visiting Grant Elementary School on Monday, November 27th. And we are doing the same thing with our December 1st visits. We're just going to have 2 simultaneous visits on December 1st, where Nadia and I will split up and we'll have those 2 separate visits. We'll have one at Dawes Middle School and one at Color Middle School. And then we are still looking for some host sites for our November 14th and 15th site visits. So if you are an ESU person and you have a school in mind that maybe is not CSI, but would love to have a visit, we are open to that as well. Please reach out to me directly to get that scheduled. Or if you are one of these schools and you would like to host, again, reach out to me directly and we'd love to be at your school. And I just want to extend to everyone who has already volunteered to be a site school, Grant, Omaha Nation, Dawes, Color. Thank you so, so much. Like, we know it's not an easy ask and we know it takes a lot to like, and it can throw off your whole day to have a bunch of people visiting your school. But we hope that this will be a really like positive and helpful use of everyone's time, and we'll get the chance to meet together in person. So we're very grateful for you all letting us into your sacred space, which I know is not an easy thing to do. So thank you for that.
If folks would just drop them some love in the chat, you can use your reactions, you can use some emojis. Can we just show these schools some extra love for hosting us on these days? So thank y'all so much. Show it in the chat. Okay, go back.
I will also say I have not been to Grant, Dawes, or Color, but I did go to Omaha Nation last year. That school is beautiful, and there is a cafe there with incredible coffees and like in the school. So if you get a chance to go there, shout out to you. Okay. Other quick thing, I'm going to send this via email. We don't have time for it right now, but I will send out a sample agenda of what the site visits will look like. For the most part, we will make some adjustments based on the school teaching schedules. And then I'm also, very important, I'm going to send out a link to a spreadsheet where I'm going to ask you to identify the specific people who will be attending. And we do have to limit attendance to like 2 people per school, including the principal, and you can bring one other person if you would like, but you don't have to. So please make sure you look out for that link where you can tell us who exactly will be attending, so we know we can plan all the logistics out accordingly. All right, that felt like a marathon. I feel like I'm talking really fast. Thank you so much for your learning today. We had a blast as always. You guys are an incredible group of folks. So we really appreciate your willingness to learn and consider your context, and you ask incredible questions. So keep all that coming. Our asks of you is to take your learning with you. Stay tuned for more details about the site visits from me, and then practice observing those at least 3 classrooms using the core rubric. And I will post on Google Classroom where you can submit your ratings for all of that. Nadia, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just really quick. I mean, looking at some of the responses in the survey, please, 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 our emails are here. Reach out to us if you have any questions, if you want support planning, if you're like, 3 observations, how do I do that? We have tons of scheduling tools. We have strategies to help you think through that. We can help, we have templates, we have so many things, but we're super, super happy to provide ourselves as resources. If there's anything you put a 1, 2, or 3 even, you're like, reach out to us. We're happy to have a conversation. We'd send you our Calendlies. We'll send you our doodle links to like, have touch points with us. So we're super happy to provide ourselves as a resource. Thank you all. Y'all are thebomb.com. That's all I got.
Have a good day.
Have a great day.
I do